Iminatrantaishatin, the legislature in Guam is back from recess. We're scheduled to begin again today at 9 a.m. It appears we still do not have a quorum. I see three. I see the minority leader, Senator Frank Blas, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Tello Taitagui, and myself. Thank you, senators, for being here on time. We will have to recess in order to move any of the agenda items under second reading. So we were going to take a recess until we have a quorum. So we'll be under a temporary recess. Legislature in Guam is back from recess. Thank you, colleagues, for attending and making a quorum. We now have a quorum, it appears. It's 9:40 a.m. The next bill on the agenda is Bill number 363-37 COR. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Bananas to the people of Guam. Good morning to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, at this time, I'd like to motion to place Bill number 363-37 COR to the bottom.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries. We're now on Bill number 365-37 COR. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to motion to place Bill number 365-37 to the bottom.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries. We're now on Bill number 368-37 LS. Senator San Nicolas, you are recognized.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Guam. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Madam Speaker. Thank you. I'd like to place Bill number 368-37 LS on the third reading and open for discussion.
You may discuss. Senator Taitigui, you have a point of order?
Point of order, Madam Speaker. This is an appropriation bill, if I'm not mistaken. And this should be, all appropriated bills must go into the committee of the whole.
I think there's no appropriation, just an allocation of already appropriated funds.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify and that this is properly in the right section of our session agenda. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator San Nicolas, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is Bill number 368-37 LS, introduced by myself, Dwayne T.D. San Nicolas, an act to amend subsection 7 of Section 1, Chapter 5, Public Law 37-125, relative to allocating funds to the maintenance and the procurement of necessary equipment for the Department of Corrections Adult Correction Facility and the Hagatna Detention Facility. The matter was brought to my attention, and I was asked to introduce this measure to help the Department of Corrections speed up their maintenance of their facilities, and so here we are today with this bill. I asked my colleagues for their support of moving this measure forward. It's very important and crucial for the department, and I ask for your support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there any senator who would like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, can I just have a 1-minute recess? We're skipping through all these other bills that I've been preparing for, and I just wanted to just continue to acculate myself with this. If I could just have 1 minute.
1 minute recess.
Thank you.
We're back from recess. Senator Taitakwe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that short recess, just so that we can catch up, as we know it's coming along fast here in session this morning. I did attend the public hearing on this, and my biggest concern was, here we are trying to rehabilitate the DOC, and that a plan was done, God, many years ago, actually, in different phases of this rehabilitation of DOC and the expansion of it. So that's why this money, this $5 million, was set for DOC, so that it can be part of that plan moving forward. What the body failed to do, this body failed to do during the budget hearing, was give them adequate funding source for their current situation that they're on, which is in desperate need at DOC. You know, we look at the issues that's happening in our school systems, you know, how old these buildings are. Well, DOC comes into that same perspective. And it's very difficult for them to address these issues when I think the only thing that was allotted to them in building costs was $70,000 in capital improvement, which was ironic. You know, I support this bill. I don't have a major problem, because it's the current situation we are, and the safety and well-being of not only our prisoners, but most especially those employees at Department of Correction. We need to ensure their safety as well, and that's today. We can't wait until a new facility is built up. And I think it's important, and we have to remember to this body and the incoming 38th Guam Legislature, that the DOC needs the assistance now. We're not just talking about manpower there and guards that are needed, but we're talking about what it's needed today. So I stand in support of this measure, though I hate to see that the plan to, the foresight and moving forward and building our DOC to a point where it's not going to be, what did they say, federal receivership is going to come in and take over? Because that is the case, that it could happen today because of the condition of the overcrowdedness of DOC currently right now. So I think, I thank the author for this legislation and looking at what needs to be done today. And then I hope, again, that this body remembers the condition that DOC is in today and that they need to be addressed today, moving forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Taitakwe. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues and the people of Guam. A little bit of a tough situation I feel I'm in, as I definitely want to support the intent of the bill, but as the author said in his open, what the bill is intending to do is help the Department of Corrections, but I just worry that by helping the Department of Corrections in this way, we are hurting the Department of Corrections, because this $5 million that is being allocated in this bill is supposed to go towards the A&E design for the new prison. And the solution for the overcrowding at the current facility is, of course, to build a new prison. And I feel like if we take this $5 million and give it to DOC and allow them to spend it, granted on what they believe is necessary, I hope, we will be right back to, I don't even want to say square one, square zero, with our plans to build a new Department of Corrections. And in my opinion, the director is getting very fancy. He's talking about letting out this type of pretrial detainee or this type of individual. But I think that just doesn't sit well with the people of Guam to talk about conditions being dangerous in the Department of Corrections, and so you're going to release many of these people who are, granted, maybe facing charges this time around for a nonviolent crime, but may have committed violent crimes in the past or have a lengthy and extensive record. So I think that's why we haven't seen a lot of traction with this discussion. And I think even the AG balked at the idea after he toured the Mangilao facility. And so that's just my worry, Madam Speaker. And again, as the oversight chair of the Department of Corrections, I have banged my head on the table. I have begged the director to be forthright, to be transparent about his needs in their budget hearing. I said, hey, tell us exactly what you need so we can put it into the budget. And basically, we weren't told, and this bill was actually an amendment I had no knowledge of, and they had, I had no Senator St. Nicholas had received it without my knowledge. I totally support the intent of what the director and DOC says will work, so I scheduled the hearing in a very expeditious and timely manner because I knew it was the intent of the author to have this bill dealt with in this last session. But again, I just worry that by providing this immediate help to the Department of Corrections that we are jeopardizing the long-term solution that our island so desperately needs, and that is, of course, the construction of a new Department of Corrections. And then I'm also concerned, Madam Speaker, just about some of the things I'm hearing as, and again, I completely support, I was in the public hearing. I know there's a very urgent and desperate need for some of the things that they're planning to procure should this bill pass with this money that again has been allocated towards the new prison. But just in what I'm hearing, you know, I'm not sure how buying new vehicles deals with the overcrowding at the facility. And that's just the type of thing. And, you know, granted, again, we asked DOC to come clean and to tell us everything they needed so we could put it in the budget. And they did receive a significant increase in their budget, but we were not told about the need for this $5 million. And so I know that there's a lot of buzz going on at the Department of Corrections right now because of this bill, and I know that they're preparing their purchase orders. And you know, I don't want to make it sound like a Christmas shopping spree, especially considering the author's role as Santa Claus on our island. But I just worry, Madam Speaker, that we're going to give this $5 million. Again, we're going to go back to square one with the construction of a new prison, which we haven't even really made progress on. But we're basically draining that bank account to give DOC leadership the ability to spend this money. And again, if it's going to address the severe overcrowding, I support that, but I just worry that, you know, we're going to buy things that aren't necessary or don't really address the very serious situation of the Department of Corrections. So I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts on it. Again, Madam Speaker, I'm a little torn because I know that DOC needs the funding, but again, I just want my colleagues to consider the cost of this. I mean, both literally and figuratively, as we are basically allocating money that has been set aside for the construction of a new prison and the A&E design, and then taking that money out and allowing DOC to spend it on what they think will work for the facility. So, si Masi, Madam Speaker.
Si Masi, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone who else would like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I also kind of have some mixed feelings because I've gotten some feedback from individuals that work at Department of Corrections. And while we know there's ongoing needs, I have to tell you this is another example of what's yet to come. Fortunately, I will not be here to have to deal with the financial issues that the next legislature is going to be challenged with, because we're already starting to see that with all this windfall of cash, some critical needs are not currently being funded. But I've heard complaints and concerns that this money being taken out of the plans to begin the design of the new prison facility is going to adversely impact the ability of that process to move forward. And unlike the hospital, of course, we have the debate with the hospital. The governor is really, you know, I wish the rest of the government worked as quickly, but they're trying to move as quickly as they possibly can to move the hospital up to Manila at any and all cost. And of course, we need a new hospital, but they're still, you know, they kind of want to bypass all of us here as to where that should be and have the policy-making body of the government engaged and involved in that process. A little different. We're not debating the location of the new Department of Corrections and the upgrades that are desperately needed at that facility. But what we have is a situation here, $5 million that was set aside specifically to begin the design of the new prison. And I'd like to ask, does the author know where they are with regards to that process? Have the wheels already started turning with regards to announcing, with any competitive bidder for the actual design work? And where are they with regards to that? Because are we already interjecting ourselves in a process that may have already started? Or have we not moved at all with regards to where we are with the design work for the new prison?
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Ma'am, could you go ahead and repeat the question, please?
Yes, sir, no problem. I just wanted to inquire, where are we with regards to the process of Department of Corrections facilitating the procurement of the A&E work for the design of the new prison?
Yes, ma'am. I just got word that it's already out for bid.
I appreciate that information. I think that's where the challenge is, and I don't argue at all, Madam Speaker, with the desire and intent of the author with regards to legislation. I don't doubt that there are pressing needs at Department of Corrections. But my concern is if we're already in the process of looking at moving forward with the design work, and I have to give Department of Corrections a little credit here, because at least they are looking on how can they facilitate building the new prison, and how they have even proposed doing it in phases so that even though they don't have all the money up front, they can begin the process. And they have the property there on the existing facility to be able to do that. They provided us their plans of how they're going to be able to still operate the existing needs of the current prison that's there, and yet also begin the construction to help facilitate how they can move forward and simultaneously doing these things at the same time. So I didn't hear, nor have I heard any disagreement here from the majority of members of this body with regards to the plans that they proposed. We actually complimented them on the fact that they made all these efforts and put these plans in place on what I think is a fairly reasonable proposal. Considering their lack of resources, I give them credit for moving forward and putting that in place. So I'm unsettled in the decision that should we go ahead and transfer this money for current operations when they've already begun the process. And we know that the critical need is there. We know that the challenges of manpower is there. I mean, I've had family members that have worked at Department of Corrections and good, very close personal friends who have worked at Department of Corrections, and the challenges that they face as guards up there. We know there have been unsafe conditions for both prisoners and for the correction guards that are there. More the reason we understand the technology is out of date, the facilities are out of date. We don't have the maximum safety for these inmates that are there, nor do we have it for the community. More the reason we need to move forward with the new facility. And I would ask that we look for other sources of funding, because there's been all this bragging, you know, the money's here, it's falling from the sky. No problem, we can cover that. Because we can spend on so many other things, but the things that really impact our people here, we don't have the money for. So in this particular case, I have reservation with taking these funds on a process that's already in place with regards to getting the design work done. A lot of time and effort and a lot of patience, because it's been so many years. I mean, goodness, Department of Corrections was outdated 30 plus years ago when it was in receivership. And here we are, you know, we're heading into a new year in a few weeks, and we haven't moved further along. And now all this time and effort, and like I said, I give them credit. They put a lot of time and effort and a lot of thought in this process of how can they facilitate. They know they can't get a new building all at one time, but they propose to do it in phases so that they can begin the process. And I give them all the credit for that. That's the foresight we don't often see in government, especially in a department that's been, you know, it's been so challenged. So with that, I just, you know, I don't think I'm going to vote in favor of this bill. I've heard feedback, like I said, from those that work there that are frustrated because they put all this time and effort that they've collectively invested to move forward. They finally see some light at the end of the road here, where there's hope that they're going to be able to see a new facility begin the process of construction. And I think we all know and we've heard what the benefits are that we will receive, considering the fact that we are challenged to get correction officers. So we can build a better, a safer facility, a facility that's upgraded, that has a technological capability for security, that would make it more manageable. Those are all pluses. But if we're going to now intercede at this juncture, after pretty much the majority of us have said, yeah, we're going to go down this road, we support DOC's initiative, and now we're going to stop in the middle of the road and we're going to say, no, we're going to take this money for current needs. There's always going to be current needs. Is there nowhere in this government of what we thought was $1.3 billion, but recently reported with all the federal money that we've received, $2.1 billion in the government of Guam, that there can't be other sources? Why can't the governor transfer money to Department of Corrections to address any critical need at this time? But to take what has been put in place, what we as policymakers, not the governor herself, but what we collectively as policymakers have agreed is a plan to move forward. So much so that we put the money aside to begin the process in good faith. You know, sometimes all we have is hope. Because we look at the track record and we don't see a lot of good things being built these days. And the one thing we feel we definitely need a hospital, but the governor wants to do that all on her very own without the involvement of the policymakers or the medical community or pretty much anybody else. But in this particular case, we as policymakers have agreed with the plans brought forth by Department of Corrections. Like I said, I give them all the credit because they've always been at the short end. And now they've come forth and, you know, darn, they've done pretty good. And so why are we going to set that process back? Why would we want to do that? Because it immediately makes the problem go away. Well, I'll tell you, let the director go knock on the governor's door and ask for additional funds for what they may need right now. Because that is possible to address from other funding sources. But to take this money that we already decided and concurred and agreed and said, hey, green light, move forward. We support you. And now we're going to say, oh, no, let's just stop that midstream. Let's worry some other day down the road. And let me tell you, I don't think the financial picture in the near future is going to get better. Even with all that's here, because of all the multi-million-dollar obligations this body has also placed on the backs of the people, that moving forward will continue to multiply every year. It's going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to get more and more expensive. And yet, where is all that money going to come from? Right now, we are riding on the backs of Uncle Sam. And sure, we're going to get more military personnel here, but is all that going to pay for everything while our tourism industry is still lagging behind? Uncle Sam's going to keep flowing all this money? And we're just going to sit here joy happy and keep appropriating? I don't think so. At least that's what my experience tells me. In this particular case, the need for constructing a new Department of Corrections facility is critical. It needs to happen. And that process is already underway. So if we're going to interject ourselves at this point and say, oh no, we're going to just take the money because we have critical needs every day. We all know, having worked in the executive branch, that money can be moved around. The governor has the transfer authority. She can look at other resources that are not as critical and transfer money to DOC for the, let's not kid ourselves. We should not take these funds, this $5 million that we've set aside to move the construction of a new facility forward. Anyone who's spent any time at Department of Correction knows there is a need for a new, safer facility up there. And I've spent some time up there in my time. Not as an inmate, but we used to go up there and do educational outreach with the prisoners or the inmates up there on ensuring they do conservation farming, which they used to have a very active farm up there. And we used to work with the inmates up there at that facility. But colleagues, this is an easy, quick fix that has long-term implications that are not favorable to moving forward the construction of a new facility, because I don't know when there will be a better time. It's taken this long to get to this juncture. And if we're simply going to be, by one simple vote, say, you know what, we're going to take all that money away and we're going to deal with it with critical everyday needs, that the director and this administration have the ability through other resources to address, and can, if they will, is there to, my goodness, if we can go up there and try to condemn private property in Mangilo and try to move all that at lightning speed, I can't see why we can't use those same resources to address the current needs of the Department of Corrections. But to take this money, if the wheels are already turning, to get the design work done, I hate penalizing people that have worked hard to do well. Because to me, it's the bad players that should be penalized. That's the way the scales of justice should always be. And to discourage those hardworking people at DOC that have put all this together, that have sacrificed, that have held that place together all these years, in what is unsafe conditions, in challenging conditions, when the resources and the finance have not been invested to assist them. And now we're going to say, well, let's just remove that off the table because we got pressing needs every day. Anyone who's run an operation in this government, those needs are there every day. But if our agenda is to simply say, well, too bad, this is the easy solution, how long is this money going to last before it's eaten away? And then what? What's left? The circumstance up there does not get any better. It continues to deteriorate. And we're not ensuring the safety, more importantly, not just the inmates, but more importantly, this community. We are not ensuring the safety of our people because we can't guarantee that those that have been sentenced to serve time up there are going to stay in there. My goodness, we remember the days when they used to get a pass to go out. Remember? They used to be able to get out of that place and stroll in when they wanted to. So, colleagues, I appreciate the intent of Senator San Nicolas in sponsoring this. I have no argument about the needs that have been raised and what he believes will be addressed with the passage of this legislation. But to stop this process midstream on what is a critical need in this government is not the right thing to do. We should not pass this bill. We should not remove the need and the hope, especially for those that work in that facility, whose lives are impacted every day, who fear their safety every day up there. We should not take that away with the passage of this bill. There has to be another source of funding, and if we've been bragging about all this money flowing left to right, up and down, we can dance and have a party, then there's got to be another funding source that can be used to address these needs. I don't argue the needs that are being brought forth, but I don't think this should be the source of funding. It's easy for us to do it, but it's not the right thing for us to do it. So with that, Madam Speaker, I conclude my comments with regards to this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Senator Brown.
Buenas, colleagues. We're on bill number 368-37 on the main motion. Is there any senator who wishes to speak on the bill? Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
I just wanted to raise a couple points. And when I reviewed the committee report on this bill, the director of DOC was asked, exactly how much do you need? Where is your list of what amount of money you need and what it's going to be spent on? And he said, oh, I don't have that, but I'll provide it right away. And my understanding is that was never provided to the legislature. So we're kind of dealing with an unknown description of repairs, an unknown amount of repairs, and that's where we end up with the allegations coming from other people that this money might be spent on new cars and different things that are really not capital improvement for the prison, and not what was described in the hearing as what would make these officers safe in doing their jobs. The other thing that was pointed out during the budget hearing was that why wasn't this requested during the budget process? Sorry, on the hearing of the bill, it was asked, why wasn't this concern or this need brought up during the budget process? And he said he didn't know whether it was and he would check. And I don't think we've gotten a response on that either. And so I think those are very legitimate and valid concerns that really should be addressed by somebody who wants to take the $5 million that actually that law was passed several years ago, and it was funded in the 2024 budget up to $5 million. There was even a bill requesting to fund it up to $15 million that was vetoed by the governor, saying that's not the way to do it. And what did she say? She said, Gita says that this will impact our debt service and future bond borrowing. Gita said, while the agency supports the intent of the bill, the legislature should reconsider the cost of construction for phases 1 and 2, which exceeds the projected amount allocated for project construction. Meaning they're already in trouble in this construction project for the new prison. I don't want to see another Simon Sanchez High School type of delay in this procurement when the money's already been put there. It's general fund, good money. It's been allocated, appropriated, put the Department of Corrections to begin the new construction. They had a plan when they came to us, and I really want to commend them for that. They had a plan. They had it planned to the details, which property they were going to use, how they were going to position the buildings. They had drawings for us, how this was going to improve security for them. That's really the bottom line. How all of this money and this planning and the sacrifice by the people of Guam and general fund money towards that project needed to be done immediately. And they convinced us then, this was several years ago, that needed to be urgent. Last I heard, this A&E might be out under bid, and we're not even sure what the final amount will be. And if we're not sure, then how do we know it won't exceed the $5 million that's been allocated for this project to begin? And I don't have the other committee report. The vetoed bill for Senator San Augustine asked that it be increased to $15 million. I'd like to see, it looks like there is a need for more money, even maybe than the $5 million that we've allocated to just begin this project. And we need to see this project not just begin, but get to the end. We need to see it completed. We need to see that we have a new prison and that we are going to make our officers safer, and we will be able to attract more officers, and that we are going to take care of our own commitments towards the safety of those who have been accused, those who have been convicted. So those are pretty much my concerns with the bill. Again, this information was from the public hearing on this matter, and my understanding is they have not given us an update on where the project is. They haven't given us an update on what exactly do they need out of the 5 million, and what impact will it have on that A&E that's out to bid? Will it stop it? Will it delay it? Will we have to start from scratch? Because this is exactly what happened with Simon Sanchez. We had one delay after another, and we are now almost a decade later trying to figure out who caused this delay. And it's things like this. The money that was appropriated years ago for a new Simon Sanchez was used instead by GDOE for operations. And so now, we're all scrambling to rededicate what we had already dedicated for Simon Sanchez. And I don't want to see that happen with this prison. We've already dedicated good money to build the new prison. And I agree with my colleague who says perhaps there is other funding depending on the amount. If we could know the amount, what we could use to get this started and not interfere with the current solicitation for the A&E. And I certainly hope that that's going forward and that's not going to be put on hold based on this bill. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. Senator Tydegui, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But right now, I have a point of information with regards to the list. The Speaker is correct. The needs of the prison, especially the generator that they're having problems with right now due to the overcrowding as well as other things. And the director of DOC is sending over that list right now for us to look at. And as far as the AE is concerned, Mr. Speaker, is that the AE is in negotiations. However, it's not even close to 5 million. It's more like 15 million is what I've been told. So it's something that would have to, longevity, it's going to take quite a bit of time before we can even generate that kind of revenue at this point. In the meantime, the DOC is in desperate need of repairs to their facility as well as the generator is what I've been told. But as soon as I get that list that the DOC director is sending over, which he thought he sent over to the good author of the legislation as well as yourself, he's now sending that over for everyone to see how badly DOC is in right now. Thank you.
Sidus Masi, for your point of information, Senator Tydegui. Speaker Terlai.
Yes, I would just ask that when we get the list that we be allowed to speak again, because I think that's very relevant as to whether we are going to take money from the appropriation for a new prison and put it towards that list. Sidus Masi.
Senator Duenas, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chairman. I rise actually in support of Bill 36837, and I'll make a few points of why I believe it's an appropriate thing to do. In discussions with the director, and we know the situation up there right now, particularly with the overcrowding and everything that's been happening, and the Agano facility, let's keep in mind, Mr. Chair, that that's a federal facility. You know, when I look at this, and I look at the hospital funding several years ago that we passed that bill, which basically was allocating reimbursement of the ITC as a real funding source now to be able to fund a lot of these capital improvements. But nothing has shown me, Mr. Speaker, that this is a savings account, meaning that it's a revolving fund where every year we appropriate $5 million and it's building. This is an annual appropriation in the event that the procurement goes through, everything transpires, and you got debt service that you can go to market with that is an approved by law debt service, and that's why we adopt it in every fiscal year budget. Mr. Chairman, the way I see it is that this funding source is part of the appropriation authority that we passed in the budget for this fiscal year. So I do agree that, you know, the governor should exercise, of course, any transfer authority for these type of issues. But, Mr. Chair, the way I see this is is it's kind of one and the same. Because the 5 million is actually part of the appropriation authority that the governor received through the for the passage of the fiscal year budget. So, I mean, when there's transfer authority done, certainly there is identified areas where funding comes from. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, which is which. But the fact is that at least this law will give the authority, in lieu of the fact that we know we're not anywhere near ready to go to solicitation, as the retiring point of information pointed out, that they're even far from the A&E. You can't go to, even think about going to market and try to get a contractor to construct the new prison until you've got all that design work done. So, Mr. Chair, in lieu of the fact that we're seeing daily reports of the director wanting to meet with the AG to address overcrowding, putting proposals out on the table, while dealing with also facilities that are falling apart. You know, definitely the Simon Sanchez scenario by the speaker has discussed that is a big concern. But I think receivership is also a big concern. We've went down that road, Mr. Chair, and we've had judges that have come in and said, $1 Million Mondays, your facilities no longer meet. We've been through that road with DOC before as well. Came into compliance, but we now probably are in danger and falling out of compliance if we have facilities that can be deemed not safe enough to operate in. I think it's a responsible measure. It doesn't seek additional revenue. It gives the authority to be able to use the revenue that's already been identified in the fiscal year budget for a purpose other than what it was designed to do in the event that there was the ability to go to market on the prison. And I tell you, Mr. Chairman, in the meetings that I had with several directors, going back to Robert Camacho and even earlier than that, and the warden, I can't be a bigger cheerleader for everything that they've done. They have got the most comprehensive, effective plan from phase 1 to phase 4 for a state-of-the-art prison facility that almost pays for itself because of the ability to reduce the manpower requirements with all the things that a modern-day facility does, with a control room that operates like a spaceship. So kudos, and we cannot heap more kudos on the entire team up there, DOC, that's put that plan together. But having said that, unfortunately, with the work that's been put in, we are still more than likely years away from the construction of a new prison. So in the meantime, I think this is a responsible thing to do. As I said, the transfer authority that the governor has certainly is within the entire general fund appropriation. I believe we passed it at 15% this year. But what are we really talking about? What pot of money is it? It's the general fund. When we adopt revenues for the government of Guam, we have line item categories to where we say that money is going to go, but the truth is it's a lump sum budget. And that's what the transfer authority is for. So maybe the bill's redundant, but maybe not, because of the fact that you've got to be specific in this area, because you're going to be reallocating debt service. A debt service that I think we all know, sitting here today, know that is not going to be realized within this fiscal year, barring a miracle. So for me, I want to appropriate and give appropriation authority for the emergent conditions that exist at DOC. And I don't think that this will take away from the dreams, hopes, and aspirations of every one of those hardworking individuals that have put their blood, sweat, and tears into this plan. Because that plan is, as they look over the horizon, today, every shift will be coming in to the same dangerous, dilapidated conditions that exist. And I want to give them the authority to use funds that have already been earmarked for the purposes of seeing down the horizon what they need to deal with today. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will be voting in favor of this measure. Si Diyos Masi.
Si Diyos Masi, Senator Duenas. Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Yes, I'd like to raise a point of information to ask the previous speaker or the sponsor of the bill if receivership has been threatened for DOC. I've not seen that in writing anywhere.
Mr. Speaker, I was speaking to a well-known situation at the conditions of Department of Corrections, whereby we had a federal judge that had ordered compliance and up-to-date, bringing the prison up to date with locking systems. I'm amazed that anyone who's been in this body for a while doesn't remember the days of Judge Marshall, I believe it was, and the conditions that we've been under. So we can always go back to where we were before, and that's the fear I have.
I just wanted to clarify my point of information is whether they're being threatened right now, because I think if they were, that the director of the Department of Corrections should absolutely be crystal clear about that and transparent and not hide that from anyone. I think that's important. Of course, we know where we've been. We don't want to go there, but we need to know where we are, and we need that to be truthfully coming from the director.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Senator Taitagui, on a point of information, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to reiterate my comments that I made earlier with regards to the threat of receivership that I brought up first, it's important to know that, not just receivership could happen at Guam Behavioral Wellness, but it could also happen at DOC. And look what happened at the leads on landfill, that coming down the pipeline. Did we see that coming? Absolutely not. And this is something that we're trying to avoid because we know that receivership is going to cost this government a whole lot more money. And also a point of information, Mr. Chair, that DOC is experiencing quite a bit of leaks. DPW, there's an amount of over $100,000 in costs and leaks at DOC that they're having to address right now, and what they're paying for right now in water bill because of these leaks. And the cost will be bared upon DOC to repair these leaks, not a GWA. So just a point of information as well. Thank you.
Si Diyos Masi, Senator Taitagui. If there are no other points of information on the main motion, does any senator wish to speak on the main motion?
Senator Nicholas, you may close on the main motion. We're back from recess. Thank you for waiting while we reset the mics. Senator San Nicolas?
Thank you, Madam.
Before you begin, would any other senator like to speak on the bill? If not, Senator San Nicolas, you may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I close, I'd like to proffer an amendment.
Please proceed.
This is an amendment to reduce it from 5 million to 1 million. The sum of $1 million from the appropriation is hereby allocated for the Department of DOC Facilities Maintenance, Renovation, Procurement, Security, Equipment appropriations for the renovation, maintenance, and repair of the DOC Adult Corrections Facility and Hagatna Detention Facility, procurement of security system materials, property, vehicles, and equipment for ACF and HDE.
You may speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We had a really wonderful and very informative discussion this morning, talking about both the intent of the bill, which is just reprogramming the the $5 million, which we've appropriated for the new facility, and the interesting part about it too is the information brought up about all the things that are needed for the facility, and the you know, to make it manageable for the intent of the of this is to compromise. I'm trying to compromise here. I learned in this legislature you can't get everything you want, but you can get something, you know. And I'd like to thank Telo Taitagui for assisting me on this measure. It's a wonderful Christmas gesture. Thank you, ma'am. I don't know why we waited so long, but thank you. And then also the information that was brought up about the governor's transfer authority. And both of these could work. But we also know that DOC is in dire need of a new facility, and reprogramming this money for what is needed today is important as well, you know. But we also have to understand the importance of actually getting a new facility. DOC is kind of like I would always say DOC is kind of like the landfill, you know. Nobody likes to talk about it. They just want to put it away and forget about it. But at least at this moment in time, we're actually discussing what's really, truly important. And so I'm asking for a reduction from 5 million to 1 million. It's a wonderful compromise, and I ask my colleagues for support.
On the amendment, Senator Taitagui, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the good author for at least putting a good compromise into this situation, because I do hear the concerns of our colleagues, you know, wanting to move forward with something, a facility that is safe, a facility that we've been working on for almost a decade, actually, if you think about it, Madam Speaker. It was something we knew the population was going to grow on this island, and that means that the population in our DOC was going to also grow. But what is not going to be acceptable is that because we can't do anything today to address the concerns, that prisoners are going to be let go, detainees are going to be let go into our community. That is not acceptable. We talk about the safety and concerns of those hard-working individuals at DOCs, as well as the detainees and prisoners there, for their safety. It's a humane thing that we are responsible for. We can't wait any longer. This is a compromise. I sent a list that was sent to me from Director Bedallo, a list of the issues that DOC faces today. That's why there's talk of letting some prisoners go, because the facility just cannot handle that many detainees or prisoners. What are we going to do? Wait around for something really tragic to happen to one of our employees at DOC or even into our community? And then we're going to bring the money that they need or be able to appropriate the money they need? The money has been appropriated, Madam Speaker. $5 million, in which doesn't even come close, not even half. It doesn't even meet the halfway marker for the AE, which is $15 million is what they need. So in the meantime, while we're waiting to find the $15 million that's needed, we can use at least $1 million of that to address what the issues are today. At least $1 million to cover the generators that are needed, to be able to provide an additional dome to cover those excess prisoners. That's what we can do today. This compromise is a great compromise, and I thank the good senator for making that compromise. We might not agree to a lot of legislation between each other, but when it comes to something like this, the safety and well-being of our community and our employees at DOC who work tirelessly, many of them up and leave DOC because of the conditions in which they work at. Their families beg them to leave because of the conditions. What are we going to do then? How are we going to address it then? We're going to wait till something tragic happens when we have the ability to do something now, because that $5 million that we appropriated is going to sit there for quite some time before we can generate $15 million to do the AE. So in the meantime, let's just sit down and twiddle our thumbs. No, we have an opportunity to correct something right now. Granted, Madam Speaker, this is not going to fix everything that's on that list that we saw, but it will take care of, not most of it, it will take care of the real pressing issues today. They have a $100,000 water bill that they have to take care of because of leaks at their facility, which they need to repair right away. They can stop that bleeding and save money. I didn't realize that DOC also had canines. And that was one of the issues. Well, actually, they put an RFQ out that's going to cost them almost $19,000 for canines. And they're very critical. So, Madam Speaker, nothing also stops DOC continuing to move forward in collecting FEMA funding as well for reimbursement from FEMA funding. We all know the federal government usually works like a snail sometimes, but we can't wait until somebody gets hurt. We need to correct these problems now. DOC, the director promised he will continue to push FEMA for that funding and hopefully get reimbursed with whatever funding they're having to use out of their own pocket right now to correct this. It's a compromise because all we gave to DOC was what, $70,000? $70,000! That's worse than the money we gave to DISIT. I think we gave more money to DISIT. And this is a safety issue because we know the Attorney General is doing everything he can possible to get convictions of criminals. So I stand in full support of this measure and ask my colleagues, this is the compromise that the good senator put in front of us. So please support this measure. Thank you.
Jesus Masi. Senator, on the amendment, Senator Dueñas, you're recognized on the amendment.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker, and I want to commend the author for making this amendment. While it may mean that some of the revenue that was sought in this $5 million, there may be some shortages, but I think he makes a good point. What we're demonstrating here, at least, is the legislature is willing to be part of that process in identifying the funding source. Because as I said earlier in my comments, Madam Chair, wherever the governor is going to get the money from, it is true, she has appropriation authority via transfer. So I guess it's a good faith measure to transfer down to the governor and say, hey, you signed this into law. It's not the $5 million, it's $1 million. And I agree with the retiring speaker. Maybe if, for some reason, the A&E comes to fruition, we might have to do a supplemental appropriation, but this might be the $4 million that's there. Because remember now, let's keep in mind, every year we're appropriating $5 million because we did that as per a public law several legislatures back, I believe the 35th or 36th, and identified that because of a set-aside that we knew we were going to start realizing in reimbursements of EITC. A good move by this legislature to appropriate monies towards capital improvements and lockbox those fundings. But from time to time, of course, what we come into is we're not going to see that the possibility of going out to market for that debt service to be dedicated and making sure that we can get a contractor in place to do it. Well, then another year. It's not a savings account. It's an appropriation every year in order to be able to keep to our commitment of prior public laws that we've passed. But I think this is a good measure to say, you know, we want to demonstrate from the legislature that we're going to identify a funding source that's going to give you the appropriation authority to be able to use that $1 million. I'm sure there's going to be more expenditures to it, possibly, Governor, and we're asking you to exercise your authority to meet whatever additional requirements that may be necessary. So I commend the author for showing good faith and for also saying, well, in the event that this additional $4 million can be used for something else that's designed towards the construction, then so be it. I think it's a good compromise. I think the bill in the end sends a message that we're committed, and this is what we'd like to have happen. But we'd also like you, Governor, to exercise your transfer authority and make sure that there's no immediate issues and to move forward on whatever the pending emergencies are. Sijus Masi, Madam Chair.
Sijus Masi. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Brown, you're recognized on the amendment.
You know, I appreciate the compromise, Madam Speaker. This kind of makes it look a bit chaotic to me. I mean, I'd rather have DOC come here and explain, because if you look at the procurement process, you can't go out and do an A&E without the revenue to do it. The money has to be there in order to go out and facilitate that process. So I don't have that information. I have bits and pieces because so-and-so called so-and-so. And we're supposed to make policy decisions based on that. And we did just recently, as you mentioned, Madam Speaker, have, you know, the budget hearings and the budget. We're only into December. And this is how we're managing government, this kind of, oh, we have crisis today, and yes, give us the money, and yes, let's take out the money that we're putting aside for the future construction that may happen, may not happen. We don't know what's happening. We think continuing the situation at DOC is the solution because it's a crisis today. My gosh, it's a crisis. This is not how you manage and operate. And we'll send messages to senators while we're in session because this is not the process. This is not an organized process. And this is not how qualified managers operate. So somehow we think today we're going to give $1 million, and then 5 months from now we're going to give another $5 million, $6 million, whatever it is, because the crisis will continue at the Department of Corrections until we build a new prison facility. And right now we're supposed to just throw out another $1 million because, that'll compromise for today. I don't know what kind of planning is here when we already know that presentation has already been made, and I know because I attended those hearings. But now all of a sudden that's all, everything, nothing, and we're just gonna, because there's a crisis today. How did we get here 3 months into the fiscal year? Where is the administration taking responsibility of properly managing the crisis if we consider Department of Corrections critical? Because yes, there are people up there, good or bad or ugly, whatever the case may be, but there are human beings up there that obviously need to be taken care of. But now we're somehow supposed to decide that here today. I appreciate the compromise, but this does not solve the key root issue here that has not been addressed. And sure, we can give the $1 million, but how long is that going to last? What's the next crisis? How do you operate an agency with constant crisis this early on in the fiscal year? And if the administration didn't advocate for the budget and they're not moving money there, then how critical is it? But colleagues, we can't sit and praise Department of Corrections when they're in front of us and say, hey, good job. You got a plan. You even got it phased. We know we can't pay for it all at once, but what a great start. Do you think most of the people at Guam on an average day think, oh yeah, I want the prisoners at the Department of Corrections to have a decent living environment? Heck no, it's the federal government that came down and mandated it. You recall it's been in receivership before. It's not because we decided that's a priority. Most people don't think about it. As a matter of fact, with all the crime on Guam, they could care less. But our humanity requires us to ensure that even people that have wronged this community have a safe environment. We certainly want to ensure that the officers that are up there and people that work up there have a safe environment. But we cannot operate government with this kind of chaos. Oh, let's throw $1 million today, and then what, 3-4 months from now, next legislature will have another crisis. Because that will continue because the facility can no longer accommodate its mission. It's aged, and it has more people than it was ever intended to house. And I don't think we can answer those questions. I don't think anybody here can answer those questions. I don't even see why, Madam Speaker, if we're in this situation, we can't have a committee of the whole and have Department of Corrections come down here and explain this chaos. We obviously have time in between waiting for colleagues to show up. So I'm going to make that request, Madam Speaker, that we have a committee of the whole, ask Department of Corrections to come down here and ask these questions. Because once we start chipping away at what we decided not too long ago was a priority of building a new Department of Corrections, that can is going to get kicked so far down the road, it's not going to get funded at all. And if they've already ventured down the road to get the design work done, what are we doing by interceding? Because they couldn't have begun that process unless they had the money to procure. They had to have the money in the account to procure. You can't go out and procure and advertise if you don't have the money set aside for that purpose. Unless, they're going to come back and say, well, it's not enough, you need more. I don't know the answers to those questions because they're not here and they've not provided me that info. Have they provided any of you that information?
Point of information, Madam Chair, just to...
Please state your point of information,
Yes,
Senator Taitzagui.
Yes, I mentioned earlier that I got a call from Director Badallo, and he has mentioned that it will be $15 million for the AE. That's what the funding amount is needed. So it is $15 million. I just wanted to clarify. I did mention that earlier when I was speaking.
I heard, Madam Speaker, I heard that quite clearly. I'm right here. That doesn't resolve my concern. And how does Director Badallo know that? I'd like him to come publicly and tell us, how does Director Badallo know? Again, how do we operate government with phone calls to a senator during session on a bill? I've never in my career and the times I've run operations in this government, I don't operate that way and call the senator on the bills, blah, blah, blah. This is chaos. I want these people accountable, not just, I did a phone call. Give me this money. And we're appropriating the people's money because I got a phone call. Because colleagues, once we go down this road and once we start diverting, I think I want to be clear what we're doing here. Because we all know this new facility needs to get built. And all we're going to have is a continuation of the crisis that is up there, and it will continue on as it has for the last 30 plus years. Because DOC has been in receivership. And I guess we'll just wait for Uncle Sam to come back in again and maybe tell us, we have to take over because you can't do it. And then through the court order, and guarantee the money's going to get put up there because we will have no choice but to provide it. But this is not how you properly operate an agency. Unless I want to see the DOC director tell us, okay, we're just, at this point, we're so far in the hole, we're not even thinking about a new facility. Then let him come on the record, not a phone call, come on the record down here publicly and tell the people of Guam that that's the track we're on. Because they need to be held for more responsibility than this background stuff that's going on here, and on that basis we're supposed to make decisions. Because it's not just $1 million, Madam Speaker. It's not just the $5 million we're talking about here today. It's whether or not a new facility is even on the agenda to get built. Because they will always have a reason to erode the funds that are there. There will always be another crisis. And is the crisis creating itself, or how well is the facility being managed? The generator brought down. Is anybody maintaining the generator? How old is it? How often is it used? How often is it tested? How often do they run it to make sure it's running? But no, somehow that's our crisis because things are not properly managed. So I'm going to make that request, Madam Speaker, because I have no comfort level with where we're at or what's been discussed here today to say I'm going to vote for this bill. And I want to request a committee of the whole. I'm going to make that motion and have the director of DOC and whoever he chooses to have with him come down here and answer these questions. Because that, to me, is a big question mark. And right now, I understand the desire and the intent and all those wonderful things, but I don't have the facts in front of me, and I don't have these individuals that are supposed to be entrusted in these positions on the record. Because if the current director is throwing out the idea, tangibly with the money that's been put aside to construct a new building, then I want him on the record to say that. If he is indeed on the road to already with the A&E design and that's already been procured, I want him to tell us and the people of Guam that. Because this is not just a little itty-bitty bill, $1 million, no big deal, $1 million here or there. This is really going to impact where we're going to be, because I want to know where we're going to be. Since I soon will be a citizen in this community on the other side of the table, and I will be there, people. But I don't think this is a responsible decision being made without that information on the record. And I want the Director of Corrections to come down here and tell us that. So I'm making that motion, Madam Speaker.
There's a motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole and ask the Director of the Department of Corrections to appear before the Legislature. On that motion, is there any objection? There's an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7. Motion fails. Senator Brown, you still have the floor on the motion. On the amendment.
Well, I'm disappointed, Madam Speaker, least to say. It's this kind of stuff that doesn't hold people that should be responsible publicly for coming before the people of Guam and answering these questions. They say they're in crisis, they say they need the money, but we ourselves, the sponsor, sad to say my good friend Senator San Nicolas is objecting to bringing the Director of Corrections down here to answer these questions. And we wonder why we are where we are. Because colleagues, yeah, let's resolve this for today. Maybe this will take us through the next few months, and then we'll be back to crisis again. And the hope of building a new building is going to be so far down the road. People at Guam won't even remember our names or who we were. Who are the people on the wall that served in the Guam Legislature? We are not making responsible decisions without the information before us. And like I said, I don't think phone calls during session are at that level. And I'm disappointed, I have to say that. Disappointed that the sponsor of this amendment is the one objecting. But yet you want us to appropriate this money for what and what impact it will have on the construction of a new facility that everybody here says we need. How disappointing. So with that, I will not vote for this amendment in favor of it. I will not vote for this bill as a result of it. Because we advocate for transparency. We advocate for these individuals that sit in these capacities to be responsible and accountable to the people of Guam. But when the time comes, we don't do it. When the time comes and we need oversight, we don't do it. And who suffers in the end? Who's left at the short end of the stick? It's our people out there who don't have the answers. So with that, Madam Speaker, I object to this amendment and will not support it.
Mrs. Usmasi, on the amendment, is there anyone else who would like to speak on the amendment? On the amendment?
On the main motion, I believe Senator Blas, you're recognized? On the amendment, I'm sorry. Yeah, dispense on the amendment. Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I stand and share the same concerns as was brought on by the gentlelady from Pago Bay. And while I appreciate the compromise that is provided in this amendment to bring the appropriation from $5 million down to $1 million, I look at the language that is contained in the amendment, and it's $1 million. Well, first off, we need to be able to define what the crisis is, because the $1 million, if this is to pass, is for the renovation, maintenance, and repairs of the ACF and detention facility, for the procurement of security system materials, for property, vehicles, and equipment for ACF and HDF. You know, I read the committee report and I saw all the different areas of concern that need to be addressed. And I share in the frustration that you had, Mr. Chair, in that obviously that listing wasn't compiled just in the last 2 months. That looks like a listing that was compiled over the last couple years. And for it not to be brought to the attention of this body during the budget deliberations and then to be thrust in this thing, nothing against Senator Nicholas, the author of the bill. He was asked to be able to move this, to proffer this piece of legislation. Okay? And I'm sure he was just as surprised at all the things that are necessary and wanting to find a way to be able to address it. I applaud him for that. But let me go back to this amendment in that the intent of the bill is to assist them in making sure that the facility is safe and habitable. What that has to do with some of the things that we're going to authorize in this appropriation, I don't see how it fits. Let's take the first one here, renovation. Renovate what? It's kind of, the irony of this is this bill is going to authorize you to use some of that money to build a new, and in some cases, renovate. So are we taking that? And how long is that process going to take? Because as I read this bill, this is going to be just a one-time appropriation. This is not be continuing. Even if we were to change the title of what this act is, there's still the main purpose. Property. That's kind of a scary thought right now. You know, I understand, you know, the reason is probably so that you just throw everything into the pot and see what, if you need it, it's there, you got the authorization. That's the scary part for me. As an individual responsible to this community and making sure that the money is being spent properly, I have no doubt that they're going to need help. I have no doubt that they're going to need, they need money to be able to make some of the necessary repairs. I have no doubt that they need money to be able to obtain some equipment so that they can improve the security. I am just a little leery of wanting to approve this appropriation without what was being asked earlier, a conversation, so that we know. Hell, we might just as well find out that they need a little bit more than 1 million. One of the things that I'd like to know in front of us is how much do you have in your account right now? As was mentioned, this was an act that was approved back in Public Law 3657, back in 2021. How much of that money do you still have left in there? Okay, and that will answer some of the questions we have. First off, is there money? Do you have enough money to be able to move forward with what you want to do? So I want to renew that motion to resolve to the Committee of the Whole. So I'd like to make that motion, Mr. Chair, is to renew that motion to resolve to the Committee of the Whole for the purposes of bringing the Director of the Department of Corrections before us to be able to, and his staff, to be able to answer the question of where this money is going to be used specifically.
C.J. Masi, Senator Blas, on the motion to resolve into the committee of the whole so we can get the director and staff in here to answer questions. Is there any objection? Seeing, hearing no objection, motion carries. Colleagues, we're going to take a short recess. Colleagues, we're going to recess till 2 p.m. So we can get a hold of Director Berdallo. Once again, recess till 2 p.m. C.J. Masi.